Long ago, there was a young, beautiful woman named Maria. She belonged to a poor family, but everybody in the village lusted after her. One day, as she was out for a walk, a rich nobleman spotted her and immediately fell in love with her. Fast forward a few years, they're married, they have 2 kids, and they're happy. That is until her husband started showing up later and later from work, until one day he didn't come home. Maria was heartbroken. Years later, however, as she was out for a walk with her sons, she spotted her husband with another woman. This sent her into a fit of rage. She was so angry she drowned her sons. And immediately after, she regretted it. She cried for her sons, but it was too late. She couldn't live with the guilt, so she drowned herself. However, her spirit remained on earth. She is now known as La Llorona. She has said to be seen walking along bodies of waters crying, looking for her lost sons. If you're out at night and you hear her cries, it's too late for you.
This is why you should never knock on a stranger's door. Once there was a man trying to check into a hotel. The woman at the front desk gave him his key and told him none of the guests are allowed to go into the room across the hall. He agreed, but as he continued to stay in the hotel, he grew more and more curious about the room he wasn't supposed to go in. At one point, he even walked down the hall to that room and tried the door. It was locked. Then he bent down and looked through the keyhole. He saw that it was just the same as his hotel room. But in the corner of the room, there was a woman whose skin was extremely pale, almost a sickly white. Her back was to the wall, so the man didn't see what she looked like. He almost knocked on the door, but then just decided to leave her alone. The next day, he walked past the door again and decided to look into the keyhole. This time, there was no hotel room and no woman. It was all just red. He thought that this seemed really strange, so he went to the front desk and asked about the room. After insisting on an answer, the woman at the front desk told him, "A long time ago, a man killed his wife in that room, and her ghost is still there. But these ghosts are not what you might imagine. They're completely white all over, except for their eyes, which are red."
This is why you should always be scared of clowns. In 2004, a babysitter had just sat down to watch TV before the parents got back when she noticed something. In the corner of the room was a large clown statue that, no matter how she positioned herself, seemed like it was staring right at her. As she's looking at it, the father calls to check in on the kids. She tells him everything is fine, and right before they're about to hang up, she says, "Why do you have a huge clown statue in your TV room?" There was silence on the phone, and then the father just says, "We don't own a clown statue." She immediately drops the phone, runs upstairs, gets the kids, runs outside, calls the cops. Cops go in and come out with this guy. As the police are taking the clown away, one of the officers comes over to the girl and with a very grim look on his face just says, "We found him underneath one of the kids' beds. He was holding a sharpened screwdriver."
If you've heard of the movie Megan is Missing, you're gonna want to hear this story. So this movie is based off a real story of a man named Ward Weaver. So Ward Weaver grew up in Portland, Oregon, and he turned out to be The movie Megan is Missing is based on the time that 2 girls and them and some met in his backyard. My parents lived in Oregon their whole life until they had kids, and they were always buying houses and flipping them. So they were constantly looking for new houses to buy. So my parents found this one house in northern Portland that they thought was a pretty nice house and it was pretty cheap. So they decided to go check it out. So after the realtor showed my parents this house, they decided to buy it. After the first few days of them trying to flip this house, they noticed some really weird things starting to happen. There were lights that were randomly flashing and doors that would randomly close. Then they hear a knock on the door. I'm sorry, but come back for part 2.
Once there was a girl named Jenny. She was like all the other girls except for one thing. She always wore a green ribbon around her neck. There was a boy named Alfred in her class. Alfred liked Jenny, and Jenny liked Alfred. One day he asked her, "Why do you wear that ribbon all the time?" "I cannot tell you," said Jenny. But Alfred kept asking, "Why do you wear it?" And Jenny would say, "It's not important." Jenny and Alfred grew up and fell in love. One day they got married. After their wedding, Alfred said, "Now that we're married, you must tell me why you have that green ribbon." "You must wait," said Jenny. "I will tell you when the right time comes." Years passed. Alfred and Jenny grew old. One day, Jenny became very sick. The doctor told her that she was dying. Jenny called Alfred to her side and said, "Now I can tell you about the green ribbon." She told him to untie it so he could see why. And Jenny's head fell off.
This is why you should always lock your doors. A junior in high school was home alone working on a paper while his parents were out to dinner. All night, he sits with his back to his door, sitting at his desk with his noise-canceling headphones on. Around 11 o'clock, he takes his headphones off at the same time his parents are returning to the house, and he hears his mom from downstairs yell, "Hey Adrian, what happened?" Confused, he runs downstairs and sees right away what she's looking at, muddy footprints all over the rug. He tells her, "I didn't leave my desk." And then they realize someone must have broken in. They look at the footprints and there's none leaving the house. They're worried someone's still in the house, so they run into the garage, terrified, call the police. Police arrive and they don't find anyone in the house, but they do make a chilling discovery upstairs. The police bring them to the kid's bedroom door, which had been left open all night, and they point to the message written on it in Sharpie. This is the actual transcript of what was written on his door, which means for nearly 2 hours, someone stood in this kid's doorway watching him.
3 months after I was born, my family moved into a different house in a new neighborhood. My mom told me that after we moved, even though I was just a baby, I started acting differently. She said that in the middle of the night, she'd hear me laughing, and she'd look at the baby camera monitor, and I'd be standing in my crib reaching out, as if there was someone in the room I was reaching for, but there was no one there. Once I got older and started talking, my mom told me that I would always talk about the man in the hat, and sometimes I would get upset and start crying and ask my mom where he was because I wanted to play with him. But my mom thought I just had an imaginary friend. But as I grew up, the man in the hat never went away. I kept talking about him. Eventually, my mom got worried and took me to a child psychologist when I was 5 years old. And I don't really remember it, but during the sessions, the psychologist would ask me questions about the man in the hat. But apparently, whenever she referred to him as my imaginary friend, I would get really angry and defiant and say he's not imaginary. And when she asked me what he was like, I was able to describe him in vivid detail. He wore a blue baseball hat and dark glasses at all times, a long-sleeve turtleneck, and pants. After 5 sessions, the psychologist concluded that I probably just had a really intense imagination, which is common for little kids. But the psychologist warned my mom that she should keep a close eye on it.
This is why you should never spend the night on Niku Island. In 1937, while on her flight around the world, Amelia Earhart mysteriously vanished over Howland Island in the Pacific Ocean. Despite an enormous search, she was never found. 3 years after her disappearance, a scientist discovered an incomplete skeleton on this tiny, uninhabited island called Niku Island that wasn't too far from Howland Island. It looked like whoever's bones these were, they had been ripped limb from limb. But when the bones were examined, they determined they were not Amelia Earhart's. But in 2017, a forensic anthropologist re-examined the bones and determined they were almost definitely Amelia's. So scientists went to Niku Island and they found freckle cream, something Amelia was famous for using. So the working theory is she crash landed on Niku Island and she fell asleep somewhere on the beach. Then, after smelling her blood, hundreds of 3-foot-wide coconut crabs came out of their burrows, swarmed her, and ate her.
So it's Friday night, it's Roxy's birthday weekend, and we're all going to her house for the first time ever for our group sleepover. So we get there, and honestly, everything seemed really normal at first. Roxy's house was really nice, and honestly, I was confused why she never wanted us there before. So then we start making banana bread, and all of a sudden, Laura jumps and screams and runs to the other side of the kitchen. She's like, "Did you guys feel that?" And we're all like, "What are you talking about, Laura?" She's like, "I swear something just touched my lower back." And Laura's face turned really pale, like she was genuinely scared, and we spend the next hour convincing her that no one was there, no one touched her back. So then we start watching a movie, Disturbia. Shout out to Shia LaBeouf. And Nina goes to the bathroom. And when she comes back, she's like, "Roxy, it looks like something upstairs is maybe leaking because there's this massive wet stain on your bathroom wall." And Roxy's like, "Oh, don't worry, that stain's always there." She's like, "We actually can't figure out where it's coming from. We've had plumbers come and they can't figure it out either. There's no drain or pipe or anything that could be causing a leak at that part of the house anyway." And then Roxy says, "But that's why we think our house is haunted." We all look at her kind of shocked and she's like, "Yeah, that's why I never invited you guys to sleep over because it can get kind of creepy." But honestly, at that point, I wasn't that creeped out until we went to bed because that's when stuff started getting weird.
Taking this off and telling a story. One Christmas night many years ago, some kids were playing outside and they were all having a very good time. They were all waiting for Santa to arrive and they were just overjoyed with excitement with all the gifts they're getting tomorrow. They all decided to play a game and summon Santa Claus. They remembered a story their parents told them about how to summon Santa Claus, and they thought it would be a good idea to see what kind of gifts they are getting tomorrow. They do the whole ritual, and something does not go as planned. Instead of summoning Santa Claus, they summon a witch. But not just any witch, a Christmas witch. She says, "You should never play around with magic." She says a spell and the kids disappear. None of them were ever seen again.
I'm going to be telling you the scary story of the house I lived in elementary and middle school. It was a 3-bedroom house, 1 bedroom in the basement, and 2 bedrooms upstairs. Because I was the oldest, I got put in the bedroom in the basement. Right when we moved in, I already had creepy feelings about the house. I hated being downstairs by myself. One day I dropped a $20 bill behind my dresser. I decided to move my dresser all by myself, and behind the dresser was this door. It wasn't a normal door, it was really short and just squared. It was also glued off, so I couldn't get into it. Me and my neighbor, who were best friends, worked at it for days to get into it. We finally got it open, and inside was another room. It was almost like an underground attic. The walls were wooden, the ceiling was wooden, there was no carpet, but it smelled awful. My parents found out and they were super mad at me for opening the room. They of course put that dresser in front of that door for a reason because they knew I would explore it. But after that, things started to get weird. Stay tuned for part 2.